It would all begin with a word. Return. Whose return? The writer or his demon? The return to darkness or the return to light? These questions confounded me. I could feel my mind bending from the plethora of loops and spirals, diving ever deeper into the meta-contextual layers building upon themselves within the story I was witnessing, experiencing. I could remember glimpses of departure, like fragments of some long-forgotten dream. There were threads connecting back to a previous version of myself. I saw it like it was yesterday, back in 2010. A different me, a different time. I felt something reaching out to me as I stepped into the dark place once again. It was nostalgia, creeping into my veins. With Alan Wake 2, I would have to go further into the madness, further into the darkness than ever before. If departure was the prelude, then initiation and return were two sides of the main event. I would have to write and document my experience to understand the journey. I would have to write to comprehend and illustrate why Alan Wake 2 is one of the best sequels ever made. Remedy is the world-renowned game development studio behind the iconic Max Payne and Alan Wake franchises, along with other great games including Quantum Break and Control. But perhaps the greatest asset in Remedy's portfolio is legendary game creator Sam Lake. Lake is an actual auteur in gaming. The fascinating concepts explored in this guy's narratives are totally unique in a way only Sam Lake can design. Getting a chance to revisit what I think might be his favorite series to work on, it really seems to have fueled his imagination to deliver something horrifying, mind-bending, and bizarre all at the same time. Remedy has returned to Bright Falls, and they've brought the goods with them. Everything about Alan Wake 2's design is very deliberate in its ability to keep you invested in the story the game's telling, and simultaneously perplexed about the narrative that's being written within the story. What is the real story of Alan Wake 2? What are the roles of each lead character? What is their connection? Is it all just a ruptured and disconnected reality spinning out of Alan's books? Or is it something more? These are just some of the meta-contextual ideas and questions at play as the player makes their way through the game. One could make an argument that, by Remedy diving so far down the rabbit hole with these layers upon layers of what is or isn't real, the player is at risk of completely losing focus on the main thread woven throughout the game's narrative. It's amazing to see how no matter how many layers and concepts are explored within the game, Remedy manages to keep the focus on a simple narrative throughline which centers the story back to Alan's journey. There's a lot to unpack with a game like this. For myself, Alan Wake 2 represents some of the modern gaming era's better executed concepts and gameplay, and a few moments of flawed, sometimes middling execution. It might not be perfect, but this is as solid a follow-up effort as any studio can muster after an 11-year hiatus. I suppose what impresses me most of all is the attention to detail across the board, the haunting sound design, and expert use of next-gen hardware to facilitate the scene-switching mechanic. This portion of Alan's gameplay alters a level in real time whenever Alan writes something different or adds a plot element to the world around him. This is one of the coolest and most immersive aspects of the game. The player is free to experiment with the scene-switching changes as they see fit. This significantly boosts the fun factor when you realize that altering certain areas leads to finding secrets which were otherwise out of reach. I love that the game doesn't tell you to go searching around for these secrets by switching scenes, because it allowed me to experiment on my own, of my own initiative, and discover it for myself. It's kind of great to not have to worry about the game dropping hints every 40 seconds, thereby allowing me time to think and explore for myself. Gee, what a concept. Speaking of exploration, before we dive into heavier subjects and a gameplay overview of combat and bosses, I would like to highlight the collectibles offered as side activities in Alan Wake 2. Most games create a long-winded laundry list of collectibles to find like they are part of a chore list for the player. I have to say, with Alan Wake 2, I feel utterly engrossed in everything it's offering, packed within its own comfortable runtime. The cult stashes are a great resource to backtrack for, as they always provide useful gear and supplies necessary to confront the darkness. The lunchboxes are important because they offer an opportunity to gather script pages in order to upgrade Saga's gear. The nursery rhymes are a fun little diversion, which narratively add depth and help flesh out what the FBC has been up to around Bright Falls. The rhymes also allow players to engage in an atmosphere enhancing and rewarding side activity. Completing the aforementioned side activities like rhymes will always yield something beneficial for the player who wishes to invest time into pursuing it. If you take the time to move off the beaten path, Alan Wake 2 rewards you for it. Much like Resident Evil 4, everything extra in the game has some way of contributing back into the gameplay loop itself. That's just good design. Another great example of this occurs as part of an Easter egg. Once the player arrives in Bright Falls for the first time, one will be able to find these mayoral campaign booths set up around the game world in different locales. Examining all the campaign slogans in each locale will spawn a special event in the town of Watery. If players choose to return to Watery later, they will find the building with a stage in the front lobby occupied by the mayor himself, Mayor Setter, a dog. Interacting with him yields a special collectible, which then marks points of interest to go searching for other collectibles, all of which help the player restock or gain useful buffs in some form or fashion. So when I say the attention to detail is big in this game, I'm serious about that statement. Even the collectible Easter egg in Alan Wake 2 factors back into the gameplay loop. This is why I love doing everything spread throughout the game. Every single thing felt meaningful and fulfilling rather than many of the superfluous fetch quests which are used as an excuse for modern developers to pad the runtime of their games. I'm not saying Alan Wake 2 has the best selection of side activities for any AAA game, but it does have some interesting ones. Now that we've highlighted some things about the side activities, let's jump back to focus on the big stuff. Saga's and Alan's playthroughs are distinctly similar and at the same time wildly different. Gunplay is the most unifying aspect of the two because it always involves the same process of flashlight to firearm combo across both protagonists. However, the atmosphere of Bright Falls and the Dark Place are visually and audibly unique. They represent both a picturesque town slowly being consumed by corruption, as well as a foreboding derelict of a major metropolitan environment. In perhaps a more existential sense, this represents the worst possible nightmare for the main characters, their own personal hell. While the aesthetics are different to be sure, it's the detailed approach to differentiating the Alan and Saga sections which drives the intrigue far beyond the game's combat loop. Alan Wake 2's gameplay and combat boast an intriguing hybrid of classic elements from the original game, mixed with modern quality of life improvements in a gameplay loop clearly drawing on Resident Evil 2 Remake inspiration. It's not perfect, nor does it ever reach the heights of the third-person action from the likes of RE4 Remake. However, it's still a darn satisfying gameplay loop to immerse oneself. There are two protagonists in the game, but each one largely plays the same as the other. Saga is able to unlock some more weapons on her end, but Alan has plenty of opportunities to lay into the darkness that surrounds him with weapons suited for his environment. Enemies encountered are all either cultist or darkness corrupted, though their methods of attack and speed at which they assault the player are certainly varied. Alan Wake 2 isn't going to shock you with its enemy variety, but it is focused in trying to use the enemies it throws your way as a grounded and oppressive obstacle which you don't necessarily want to face. Occasionally, you'll come across what feels like some mini-boss enemy types, but these are few and far between. The darkness-corrupted enemies are not susceptible to normal damage unless they are first struck by a beam of light from Alan or Saga's flashlight. This is where resource management comes into play, as you must stay stocked up on batteries. These are effectively the ammunition used by the flashlight. If you're a thorough explorer who likes to scour the area for secrets and resources, you'll likely make it through the game without running short of batteries. Though, there are a few sequences where, if you're not careful, your supply can run dangerously low. The ammo for your weapons can and will run out, so players should prioritize weapon switching akin to what you might be used to if you played Resident Evil a lot lately. At its core, Alan Wake 2 feels and plays like a hybrid of the original Alan Wake game and Resident Evil 2 Remake. For some, they may feel this is derivative and makes Alan Wake 2 feel like it's trying to be something else. But I would disagree. Progressing through the game in its entirety, I find it feels largely ethereal and otherworldly in a more Silent Hill sort of way. There's no doubt you're playing an Alan Wake 2 game, but the influence, or perhaps inspiration, of other entries in the genre seem to have helped shape this version of Alan Wake that we got. By the time the player reaches the dark place in Alan Wake 2, the atmospheric gameplay has already made its mark. The first boss fight against the corrupted Nightingale is moody, eerie, and excitingly horrifying. The setting and vibes of each gameplay arena or hub are so well designed and help facilitate a level of immersion, which makes the moments the player must confront the terror that much more frightening. Throughout the game's overlap sequences, junction points in the game where the line between reality and the fictional machinations of the dark place intersect, the player comes face to face with some truly mind-bending gameplay moments. These gameplay chunks don't just act as unique environments or even as the set-piece boss fights that they are, they also serve as a way to see how Alan and Saga are connected through their respective narratives. Both of the protagonist's actions are resulting in a stronger connection between the two worlds little by little, which in turn serves the purpose of the overarching narrative of Alan Wake 2. There are not many, but for the most part the boss fights all offer up some horrifying atmospheric spectacle in their own way. We start with Nightingale. And although the game's opening might be a little unorthodox, it's a great piece of misdirection. This feeds the twisted turns the narrative likes to use to ensnare your attention with a proper dose of shock and awe. Somehow, I feel like Ray Stevens would be proud. Nevertheless, Saga has to cross over into the overlap, and the player must confront Nightingale in a trippy forest arena. Nightingale has large sweeping melee attacks and phases around the environment to close distances fast. Do enough damage to him and he'll spawn like a vortex tornado, which the player must run from. Bear in mind though, Nightingale will also give chase, something I wasn't aware of and got right punished for it. Along the path of escape from Nightingale in the vortex, players can come across stashes of supplies which can be used to restore ammo, health, and batteries for those lacking sufficient supplies. After several damage phases, Nightingale will finally be retired, and hopefully someone in the afterlife will lend him some clothes. Each boss presents a different vibe, atmosphere, and threat from the last. These guys were both highly enjoyable as supporting characters, and I must say, their boss fight was definitely not what I was expecting. Suffice to say, it was a pleasant surprise. After opening up the overlap at Watery, located in Coffee World, players must descend into a new boss arena. This is another set of loops which Saga must traverse before she encounters a multi-boss engagement. Once again, the sequence is a great set piece not only for combat gameplay, but more importantly, for further immersing the player into the suffocating atmosphere of the Dark Presence's corruption. The actual boss fight itself is fairly simple to figure out, even for a completely new player. Mulligan and Thornton are split up, with one on the ledge above the small, tightly spaced spherical arena. While avoiding sniper fire, you'll have to face down a shotgun-toting maniac bearing down on you. You can try taking him out, but that's part of the catch. The pair will continue to respawn unless the player siphons out the darkness spheres surrounding the arena. The lack of these orbs allows the player to drop the two bosses much quicker than if they tried just taking them out first. Though, you may have to take them out at least once to spare some time to put out the rest of the orbs. Either way, I really enjoyed this boss fight, and found it to be a nice deviation from the first one with Nightingale. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to fight an old lady in a sewer or underground bunker while she hides in water before levitating and rush attacking you like some psychotic lunatic straight out of Arkham Asylum? Well, you don't have to wonder anymore, because Alan Wake 2 delivers a boss fight with the darkness-corrupted resident of Bright Falls' own old age facility. Her name is Cynthia Weaver. The entire sequence in the Wellness Center was one of my favorite parts of the game. This really focuses on making the most out of good atmospheric gameplay, although, to an extent, a lot of Alan Wake 2 exudes good atmospheric gameplay. So this kind of feels like an easy boast about the game, but it's true about the Wellness Center sequence in particular. It is really well done. There is something existentially creepy about medical facilities in the dark. It's even worse when reality is fractured around you, and the people in the facility are being turned into corrupted versions straight out of The Shining. Once Tor is taken into the overlap by Cynthia, Saga must give chase after her uncle. The actual looping environments the player must progress through offer one of the game's best set pieces. An argument could be made for the best, but sadly that one will have to go to another, which we will address soon enough. Once Saga is able to reach the inner sanctum of the Overlap's labyrinth, she has to restart the generator located in the outer ring of the arena. Moving through the flooded area triggers Cynthia to dash underwater toward the player to attack them. Moving quickly and decidedly allows the player the opportunity to avoid these attacks. Although, making a wrong turn and hitting the wrong prompt can mess up the timing, which allows Cynthia time to strike and go after the player. Once the power is restored and the flooded levels give way while the water recedes, Saga then is able to move downstairs to confront Cynthia. If players grab the sniper rifle before venturing into the overlap, it can be useful in dishing out some heavier damage during the earlier portion of the fight. A crossbow is good too, but I suggest switching between the sawed-off shotgun and the handgun for when she charges at you. Keeping her stunned and off of her rush attacks is an efficient way to drop her sooner rather than later. Once it's all said and done, the entire experience feels like a refreshing detour from the forest and the woods sections that Saga spends a lot of her time in earlier in the game. The fight isn't groundbreaking in the industry or anything, but it's competently designed to be both frightening and fun, which is what horror games should do well. When the time comes to finally face down Scratch, it's not what I was expecting. The first boss fight comes out of nowhere suddenly, and I'm playing as Saga running around the back of a sheriff station trying not to die. As a boss fight, Scratch is difficult for me to either dislike or support. He is possessing Alan's body, and we can see that he moves fast, exhibited by him teleporting to prevent the player from charging the light systems. While it's cool the developers force the player to figure out what causes Scratch to be stunned, it feels a little off to be able to fight Scratch on equal footing of sorts. When Scratch is in his Dark Presence form or using the Dark Presence powers, he can basically one-hit kill anything. This is exhibited by the sequence when Alan is being chased by him earlier in the game. So, with that being the case, why doesn't Scratch just instantly kill Saga or Alan or anyone else instantly the same way? I get this is part of the point of having a boss fight, but it still left me asking the question. The trick to slowing down Scratch is to drop some flashbangs on the ground near him. Doing so will allow enough time for the player to charge the generators. The player must repeat this action until the light protection system can be activated. Standard flashlight and flares won't do any good against Scratch, so it's a good thing to stockpile some flashbangs for the big guy. The first fight is pretty straightforward. I don't know why, but Scratch feels more like something out of control than the other fights within Alan Wake. Once Scratch has been temporarily subdued, he will go away for a while, but the inevitable rematch is looming on the horizon. This second fight is pure Remedy magic. Saga has her Grandpappy Odin and Uncle Tor stroll up to Cauldron Lake with a proper good rock show. After fighting through increasingly packed waves of enemies, FBC agent Estevez unleashes a powerful blast from the light equipment. From that point on, it's Saga versus Scratch for round 2. Winner takes all. This time around the plan is still the same, but bullets will also have an effect. Do enough damage and Scratch will be thrown off balance, having to regenerate some strength. During these precious moments, players will need to crank the lever on the light beam pillars. Getting both beams pointed toward the containment chamber is the final objective here. Saga will then have to lure Scratch inside the chamber. The set-piece insanity of the second fight with Scratch is more spectacle and zany fun than anything else, but it also feels unequivocally like Remedy and Sam Lake in all the best ways.
From what I've gathered, you grew up nice and sheltered with mama's pretty stories and your own made-up fury. And mama gave me a magic clicker. Well, yes, I think it's true and fair to say.
We can't talk about the overlaps and boss fights without touching on one of the most iconic things Remedy has ever done. The Herald of Darkness sequence from Alan's journey through the Dark Place is my favorite set-piece moment from Alan Wake 2. As they say, save the best for last. The Herald of Darkness section comes into play when players return to the Dark Place after having played as Saga for a while. This entire level is comprised of Alan traversing different variations of a warped stage. The arena is surrounded by walls and screens projecting a music video, featuring some of the game's cast and the old gods of Asgard performing a show and dance to the song Herald of Darkness. The player, as Alan, must fight through waves of enemies to reach the end of the stage set and end the song's loop. Honestly, there's only so much to say about this part of Alan Wake 2, but that doesn't mean it isn't memorable. It definitely is. I love when game developers try to pull off these wacky ideas, and when they can do them right, it makes it all the more special of an experience for the player. It's just plain fun and a crazy good time. I'll let it speak for itself. The most important part of the discussion surrounding Alan Wake 2 now or in the future will be focused on the narrative side of the game. This is largely due to the complex and layered approach the developers took. Alan Wake 2's split protagonist narrative has been the subject of some controversy and criticism, with some believing the character of Saga to be irrelevant or out of place in a sequel to Alan Wake where the story's focus should be on Alan. Saga has a big part to play in all this, but make no mistake, the game is definitely Alan's journey. Both characters service the overarching storyline in their own ways, but the culmination and ultimate revelation is decidedly pointed toward Alan. However, before we get into the layers of Alan's part in the game, let's take a moment to examine the secondary protagonist of Alan Wake 2, Saga Anderson. Saga is an FBI agent who is brought in with her partner, Agent Casey, to investigate some mysterious happenings in Bright Falls, most notably of which is the Cult of the Tree's murder of former FBI agent Nightingale. Whereas the opening of the game feels like a pilot episode for a Twin Peaks spinoff, the labyrinth of channeled insanity which Alan Wake 2 delves into is rich in representation of some of the genre's best moments. Saga comes into this world with a fresh set of eyes, much like new players unfamiliar with the happenings of Alan Wake in this or previous titles. She has to slowly unravel the threads of the past and connect them to the threads of the present, learning more about herself and her role in the process. While longtime fans may see Saga's inclusion as a hindrance to the story, I feel her inclusion actually helps to solidify the world for newer players, giving them a baseline to start from, so the mythological nature of Alan, Scratch, the Dark Place, and the events of the first game can be relayed into the narrative in a far more natural way. Saga follows the trail of the Cult of the Tree in her own seemingly otherworldly connection to the towns of Watery and Bright Falls. The family heritage of Saga provides insight into why she was necessary and drawn to Bright Falls to begin with. But if the world can only be saved by Alan, if only he can actually affect the change, what role does Saga serve in the conundrum? Well, Saga is meant to be a hero. Not the hero, but she is meant to be a hero nonetheless. See, as Alan is trapped in the Dark Place, he is forced to write in order to escape it. Alan is the hero of his own story, but with Alan trapped, Alan writes Return. The book is a collection of drafts of differing attempts to escape the Dark Place, with each draft bringing him closer to salvation and closer to defeating Scratch. Although it's made clear the path to making it to the end of the story has proven difficult for Alan, even causing some unintended consequences along the way. In order to make Return a reality, Alan needed to write a new draft of the story, and he would need help. If Alan is the hero of the game's story, then Saga is written as the hero of Alan's new story within the game's own story. Does that make sense? Saga is the protagonist of Alan's draft of Return, whilst Alan is the protagonist of Alan Wake 2 the game.
Return is a story about a story that comes true. And I'm a character in the story.
Not just a character. The hero. I brought Saga Anderson into this story to help me escape. She succeeded.
It cost her everything. I'd used Alex Casey in my writing for years. The real Casey had been drawn here because of that. Now he was a victim too. Saga, Casey, Alice, all this horror originates from me. It's my fault.
With Saga's help in Bright Falls, Alan is able to slowly make the necessary changes to his latest and final draft of Return, thus allowing him to free himself from the Dark Place and overcome Scratch once and for all. In a sense, the answer is in the name, as Saga is simply a meaning relating to what is said or told, i.e. like a tale told to others, like a story, a journey. Her journey through Bright Falls and Watery and beyond is chronicled and told through the pages of Alan Wake's story. Saga is a capable and resolute character. Her own unique ability is connected to her mind palace. In a sense, she is a seer, able to discern the truth and reality of things. As the world and reality she passes through alters due to the corruption of Scratch upon Wake's writing, Saga is able to remember details of what existed before. Also, players and Saga herself learn that she can make mental connections to other characters to help discover hidden truths and crucial deductions. Saga's own arc focuses on her helping Alan in his fight against Scratch, while fighting for the safety of her daughter, who will be wiped from existence and the reality being brought forth from the story corrupted by Scratch himself. On the personal side of things, Saga's journey isn't one about owning the spotlight or showing up Alan Wake. It's the story of a mother trying to protect her family and those closest to her.
Mom? Logan? Logan! Are you alright?
I had a terrible nightmare. Can you come home, Mom?
Oh, baby. It's over now. You're alright. I'm here. I'm on my way home. I love you. She's alright.
She might be one of the game's heroes, but she's clearly not the game's primary hero.
You beat this thing back in 2010, Alan. And here you are doing the same again. You're a hero too.
As Saga learns, even with the clicker in her possession, only Wake himself has the ability to defeat Scratch and push back the influence of the Dark Presence. There were a few moments where some cringe stuff popped up within Saga's playthrough. These things never detracted from the experience or the story, but they were decidedly odd and slightly immersion-breaking in the moment they happened. For example, the opening sequence at Cauldron Lake has the deputies making some stereotypical comments Hollywood scripts have led us to believe is associated with the supposedly simple-minded and backwards country folk. So, at least briefly, we have to hear something silly on that front. Then, toward the end of the game, we hear the Dark Presence speaking through a doppelganger, in an effort to try and manipulate Saga, trying to convince her to give up. In so doing, we hear the game's most cringe line, which immediately breaks all immersion in the moment, and mostly for the rest of the scene.
The story. My life, my family is just part of a book. Another white asshole deciding what I get to do, how I get to do it. He took my daughter from me. I'll never be free of this story from him. He used her.
It's clearly meant to be portrayed as the Dark Presence bombarding her with a bunch of super negative thoughts and emotions. Still, it breaks the immersion in an important scene. Outside of that, the game is almost completely devoid of any other cringe that you might be expecting to pop up. At the end of the day, the fact is that Sam Lake is a very competent writer, and this game has a very competent story, which leads us into talking about Alan Wake himself. To understand why Alan Wake features a split protagonist narrative, and why Saga has an important role to play in a game about Alan Wake, players must understand one of the most important literary and mythological structures known to man: the hero's journey. This simple concept, which forms the basis for modern storytelling structure as we know it, illuminates the entirety of Alan Wake 2's narrative as clear as crystal. If you have a baseline grasp of the format of the hero's journey, you'll be able to pick up on all the clues absolutely draped throughout Alan Wake 2. Once again, Sam Lake is a competent writer. The dude knows what he's doing. Departure, initiation, and Return. Do these sound familiar to you? They should. They are the story drafts written within the game's world. They also happen to be one of many references to Joseph Campbell's work, defining the concept of what the hero's journey is supposed to be in a mythos or narrative sense. Alan Wake is the protagonist, the main character, the hero. And this game right here is all about the hero's journey. Separated into a multi-act structure, the hero's journey is defined as 3 acts used as distinctive parts of the total journey. The first part of the hero's journey is Departure. This will be represented by the story of the first Alan Wake game. Departure follows the idea that the hero leaves behind an ordinary world and is called to some form of adventure in an otherworldly place or supernatural path. This is Alan visiting Bright Falls and being pulled into the dark reality of the corruption overtaking Bright Falls from Cauldron Lake. The second part of the hero's journey is Initiation. This is represented as Alan's time trapped in the dark place, starting in the first game and existing through to the second game. Initiation follows the idea that the hero arrives in a supernatural or unknown world where he must face trials and tribulations, often alone, though sometimes the hero does have aid or assistance in the unknown world. This is Alan traversing the dark place and attempting to escape it and find his way back home. The third part of the hero's journey is Return. This is represented in Saga's purpose to help facilitate Alan's return to the real world from the dark place. Return follows the concept of the hero coming back to the regular world of his original existence, bringing with him some form of reward. As Campbell often describes it, a boon. The hero of the myth travels across worlds to return and complete the journey. To those who seemed confused by Saga's role in Alan Wake's return, look no further than the words of Campbell himself in describing an iteration of what the return portion of the journey might entail. The hero may have to be brought back from his supernatural adventure by assistance from without. That is to say, the world may have to come and get him. Within certain versions of the hero's journey, a guiding hand or someone who acts with or without a powerful force can assist the hero to bring him home. This is Saga's role in Alan Wake 2.
I try to use him to make the story come true.
So this is coming from both of us. Maybe that's how we could communicate in the overlaps. We could use this to stop Scratch.
First, I need the ending.
I read somewhere that people were complaining that Saga was only there to usurp Alan and show up to be a girl boss at the end. Whilst that can be a reality in some modern stories, which we see pop up a lot these days, that is not the case with Alan Wake 2.
In 2010, I dived in, a leap of faith for Alice, with no idea that the cost would be a nightmare worse than death. It had taken me 13 years to get out. Now Alice was dead, because of me. And I was going to make that leap again, this time knowing the cost all too well. Another way to look at it, I had brought the dark place here with me. I never had gotten out. Maybe after this I finally could. It was a fool's hope. I had no choice. I had to do it. That didn't make me any less terrified.
There must be a way to bring a hero into the story.
If there is a hero, they will ultimately pay a heavy price.
The hero turns to look inside, is destroyed by what he sees, and is redeemed. Saga said we're both heroes. I'll pay that price. So will she.
Alan Wake is the hero, and this is his journey. This could not be more apparent than it is after the extended ending, which is part of the Final Draft New Game Plus mode. For context, the ending of Alan Wake 2's base story playthrough ends with a cliffhanger, by cutting to black before the scene is finished. Playing through the final draft the New Game Plus mode, grants players access to that extended sequence. Once Alan resurrects, after having been shot with the bullet of light to defeat Scratch, he is seen for a time with a light mark on his head, which is symbolic imagery of a third eye. For those who may not know, the third eye is associated with a state of enlightenment. Coincidentally, this is another reference to Campbell's work in the hero's journey concept. As Campbell states, when the hero quest has been accomplished, through penetration to the source, the adventurer still must return with his life-transmuting trophy. The full round, the norm of the monomyth, requires that the hero shall now begin the labor of bringing the runes of wisdom back into the kingdom of humanity. The idea of enlightenment, in the case of Alan Wake 2, gaining knowledge and wisdom, is evidenced by Alan Wake's final words in the extended ending.
And so I return. With me I bear the torch of knowledge, the light, the miracle illuminated, the master of two worlds. No, the master of many worlds.
Alan Wake begins the franchise with a call to save the town of Bright Falls from the influence of the darkness. He endures the dark machinations of the other world through his efforts in the dark place, and he returns with new knowledge and understanding he was previously unaware of before. He now has the ability to share this boon or supernatural gift with the real world. This is textbook execution of the hero's journey. This is also one of the main reasons I feel it is important to cover this topic extensively in a review such as my own. It takes patience to actively engage in the understanding of the nuance and symbolism of Alan Wake's journey, from humble beginnings to becoming a champion of light. Alan's tether to the emotional heart of the story is his deep connection with his wife. I've always felt a certain fondness for the Wake couple. Alan would move hell and high water for Alice, and in Alan Wake 2 we see how she is just as willing to make sacrifices to help her husband, even when they are separated by reality and alternate planes of dimensional existence. To me, I find the heartbeat of Alan Wake 2 to be the bond and triumph of love over space and time, as exhibited in Alice's role within the game, even though, at the end of it all, she seemingly ends up right where it all started, in the dark place. Alan's search for Alice and her search for him allowed the two to find each other against all odds. Alan's ascension to his new place in the universe, or even his defeat of Scratch, were only possible through the bond he shares with his wife. Sam Lake and Remedy deliver a fantastically wicked version of the hero's journey. They also deliver a simple yet powerful image of the power of love in a dark and sometimes hopeless world. When all things around you look darkest, never stop searching for the light. Whether that light is hope, faith, or even searching a labyrinth of nightmares and realities to find your way back to someone you love. One must never give up. Alan's arc throughout the game is not only a proper second chapter to the franchise, but it's a fitting payoff for longtime fans. Alan Wake 2 is by far one of the most surprising experiences of 2023 for me. Even though I believed in Remedy's chances to make a really good game, I didn't expect them to make a sequel this good. Alan's and Saga's respective parts shape up to be one of Remedy's best creations. Sam Lake really cooked with this one. You can tell he had been itching to tell this story for a while, because there's so much care and passion put into this. If games are going to borrow from each other, I feel they should borrow elements and inspiration from the best of their peers. Alan Wake 2 isn't reinventing the wheel, but it does a good job of bringing the gameplay style of a game like Resident Evil 2 Remake and blending it with elements from the original Wake game. Some might think this is a cop-out or lazy or whatever. I don't believe this to be the case. As one will have probably noticed by now, the Resident Evil remakes are really stinking popular and selling quite well. Resident Evil 4 Remake might be the greatest remake of all time. Currently, that game is, in my opinion, the single best third-person, over-the-shoulder style action game on the market. So why shouldn't Alan Wake lean into those waters more? Especially since it shares the same genre as the aforementioned Resident Evil games. Alan Wake 2 is a smart, well-crafted game. It has some of the best level design in recent memory, and could be arguably the best example of environmental storytelling in modern AAA gaming. One would be hard-pressed to find serious fault with the game if one were to actively dive in and explore the game's themes, nuance, and seemingly mythological nature. The narrative doesn't pull any tricks, and certainly doesn't hold anything back. While there are a few moments which add some scars to the overall presentation, this game is nothing short of an exceptional follow-up to its predecessor. In some respects, I may have enjoyed it even more. Despite a small set of flawed elements encased within the magnificence of Remedy's long-awaited Alan Wake 2, the game sets itself up as a more narratively ambitious, albeit modestly grounded survival horror entry when compared to the other entries in the genre. It has its own unique slices of horror, its own levels of crazy, and its own methods of shocking twists. Everything about Alan Wake 2 feels fresh, even when certain elements should feel familiar. This is where the game's magic elevates its already engrossing narrative even further. The real secret to Alan Wake 2's quality is twofold. Firstly, the game's striking and awe-inspired production design. Not many games that go the photorealistic graphics route often have as much flair and style to the presentation as Alan Wake 2 does, which makes it stand out from the rest. Secondly, Alan Wake 2's story utilizes a straightforward and simplistic narrative approach, while still incorporating overwhelming and complex layers of depth, symbolism, imagery, and metacontextual elements. The game never loses its focus on a simple story thread: Alan Wake's hero journey, from departure to return. There were several games which deserve high praise for the year 2023 in the gaming industry. Since remakes and remasters are ineligible for my Game of the Year award, I feel the slight edge among the other games I played leans toward Alan Wake 2 as the best. So with that said, I'm rounding out my review of Alan Wake 2 by crowning it my 2023 Game of the Year. There was too much for me to like in this game, and it offered, out of all the eligible new games for 2023, the best overall gameplay experience for me as a player. Perhaps the most impressive feat of Alan Wake 2 is becoming another entry into the Hall of Fame for what I consider to be the greatest video game sequels ever made. Thank you for watching this video to the end. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, I ask that you consider subscribing, clicking the like button, and hitting that little bell for notifications so you don't miss out on any new videos as soon as they drop. Thanks again, and have yourself a great day.
There's a wildness in the silence. I am haunted by a heart of darkness. 1,000 voices sound the siren. Worlds colliding in the heart of darkness.
Okay, what's the tip of the day? I don't want you to bang your joint.
Losing my breath, I'm still fighting to stay alive in holding on. I'm still holding on. I won't let go. I won't let go. Losing my mind, I'm still fighting to stay alive in the heart of darkness. I'm still holding on, still holding on. I'm still holding on. I won't let go. I won't let go.
There's no rush. After all, it's not a lake, it's an ocean. Ooh.